The Interstellar Academy of Veyron Prime had 32 floors, 4 species dormitories, and exactly 1 human cadet in the entire graduating class. Her name was Mara Ellison. She was 5'4", 130 pounds soaking wet, and possessed of a jaw that could crack stone and eyes the color of a storm rolling in from the Northern Ocean. The Keth cadets called her small blood and whispered insults they thought she couldn't hear. The Dravani upperclassmen called her the soft thing because her species had no natural carapace, no venom gland, no echolocation, no thermal sensing, nothing. Just bare skin and a heartbeat. What they didn't understand was that bare skin had survived ice ages. That heartbeat had never once agreed to stop. It started just after 2300 hours in the sub-level maintenance corridor, Section 7, the one the Academy maps labeled Utility Access, Restricted. The kind of place security cameras had blind spots. The kind of place 8 senior cadets had chosen on purpose. Their names, Joe, me, New York, Day, High, and with 6 Keth upperclassmen, towering reptilians with silver-scaled hides and 3 sets of serrated claws, plus 2 Dravani brutes named Rethk and Kalek, each standing over 7 feet, built like siege machines. 8 against 1. They had chosen the corridor because the lockdown alarm had already tripped on Wing C, a false signal, a clever misdirection, planted by Day 30 minutes earlier. Commander Zyrex, Academy Security Chief, had scrambled his entire response team to the wrong side of the building. Every sensor cluster, every patrol route, every armed responder was currently 600 meters away and moving farther with every passing second. The 8 of them had done this before. Not to a human, humans were rare here, but to weaker cadets, ones who didn't fit, ones who needed discouraging. The Academy looked the other way. It always looked the other way. Joe stepped forward first. He was the largest of the Keth, nearly 8 feet of armored muscle, his crest plates fanning open in a dominance display that had sent Dravani cadets scrambling on 3 separate occasions. "You're in the wrong corridor, small blood," he said, his translator crackling the words into standard. "You're in the wrong academy." Mara stopped walking. She did not turn around immediately. She stood perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds, not from fear, anyone watching would later note, but from a very specific human behavior that xenopsychologists would spend months analyzing in their papers. She was reading the room. Running calculations that had nothing to do with math. Then she turned. 8 of you, she said. Her voice was quiet. Not a whisper, quieter than that. The kind of quiet that sits below the noise and makes everything else feel loud by comparison. "That's a lot." "It's enough," said Wa, flanking left. She tilted her head. "You pulled Zyrex to Wing C, false alarm." "Smart. You've got maybe 12 minutes before he figures out the sensor was spoofed and starts backtracking." She paused. "You've done this before." Me clicked her jaw plates in amusement. "You're not scared." "I didn't say that." "You smell calm." "I've been scared since I walked into this academy," Mara said. "I just stopped letting it make decisions for me a long time ago." She exhaled slowly through her nose. "Here's the thing about humans that I don't think you've studied. We don't have claws. We don't have venom. We don't have armor plating or thermal vision or echolocation." "You're right about all of that." She set her feet. Shoulder width apart. Weight forward, centered, dropping half an inch as her knees bent almost imperceptibly. "What we have is about 4 million years of figuring out how to kill things bigger than us." The corridor was silent. Joe lunged. What followed lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. It would be discussed in whispers for the next 3 years. The Keth were built for power and forward momentum, their entire skeletal structure was optimized for the charge, for the crush, for the pinning weight. What they were not optimized for was a creature that moved sideways, that grabbed a reaching limb and used the attacker's own mass as a weapon, that targeted the gaps between armor plates, the soft hinges at the inner knee, the exposed nerve cluster at the base of the crest, the sensory membrane behind the jaw that every Keth species shared and no Keth ever expected an alien to know about. Mara Ellison had done her research. Joe went down first, his own charge redirected into the corridor wall with a crack that shook the ventilation grating overhead. Me came in low, which was smart, except that Mara had already anticipated low after high, and a human elbow driven into a Keth's secondary eye with sufficient force produces a result that is, by any biological standard, catastrophic. New York and Day came together, coordinated, the first time an actual coordinated attack came at her, and she let it partially connect, absorbing the impact in a roll that looked like failure until they realized she had ended up behind them. High grabbed her from the back. Big mistake. High found out what happens when a creature that has been prey for most of its evolutionary history is grabbed from behind, what millions of years of ambush predation trained into the meat of a species. The response was not thought. It was not calculated. It came from somewhere older than language. High did not let go voluntarily. Why and the two Dravani, Rethk and Kalek, hung back. They had come to intimidate. They had come to watch Joe and the others do the work, to be the audience, the backup, the insurance. Now they stood very still and watched the small blood stand in the middle of 6 fallen or retreating Keth and breathe through her nose like she was finishing a training run. Your turn, Mara said. Rethk looked at Kalek. Kalek looked at Rethk. Neither of them moved. Commander Zyrex arrived 9 minutes later, after the wing C misdirection had been correctly identified and his team had reversed course at a full sprint. He found 8 senior cadets in varying states of medical distress and 1 human cadet sitting cross-legged on the corridor floor, her back against the wall, eating a ration bar she'd pulled from her jacket pocket. Zyrex was a Pelethite blue-shelled, 4-armed, 2 centuries old, and absolutely unshockable. He had commanded planetary evacuations. He had de-escalated species-level conflicts. He had once talked a Dravani warlord out of igniting a sun. He looked at the corridor. He looked at Mara. Are you injured? He said. Bruised ribs. Maybe one cracked. Nothing structural. She took another bite of the ration bar. They pulled you to the wrong wing. Sensor spoof, probably planted by the one with the blue crest markings. He went down second, I can point him out. Zyrex was quiet for a long moment. 8. Yes, sir. Against 1. I noticed that too, sir. He stood in the corridor for another 3 seconds. Then he did something his subordinates had never seen him do in 40 years of service. He took out his personal log, not the official recording, the personal one, and made a note. Human cadets, reassess threat classification. Current rating, insufficient. He looked at Mara again. The Academy will conduct a full inquiry. Those responsible will face suspension pending review. I know, she said. You are not concerned about retaliation? Mara Ellison finished her ration bar, folded the wrapper precisely in half, and tucked it into her pocket. Commander, she said, let me tell you something about humans. We invented the concept of the grudge. We invented the long game. We have a word, spite, that does not translate cleanly into any of your languages because the concept requires a willingness to suffer in the short term specifically to outlast someone else in the long term. She stood up, joints popping in a sequence that made 2 of Zyrex's officers flinch. I'm not concerned about retaliation. She looked down the corridor at the 8 cadets, some of whom were beginning to stir. They should be. The inquiry took 6 weeks. All 8 seniors were suspended. Joe and me were expelled outright. Mara Ellison graduated at the top of her class 11 months later. She was the first human to receive the Veyron Prime academic distinction, and the first cadet in 37 years to receive a commendation that read, in the formal Pelethai script. Demonstrated, under conditions of extreme physical disadvantage, a quality for which no species designation in the Academy's records has an adequate term. We are choosing to call it human. She folded the commendation and put it in her pocket, next to where she kept the ration bar wrapper. Some things, she decided, you keep.